Hey, man. So we're live now, right now. I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Friday edition of Conversations with Al McFarlane. We call this the Healing Circle. It's work created by and supported by and led by our friend and colleague, Dr. Bravada Garrett Akansanya. She's the CEO of the African American Child Wellness Institute and the principal at Breakins Consulting and Psychological Services. Dr. B is what we call her, is not here today because she's doing a COVID clinic, a vaccination clinic, which is one of the things she does in her role as a health provider in our community. We will be joined momentarily by another of our colleagues and associates, Dr. Oliver Williams, who has helped sort of conceive today's conversation. Today's conversation is going to be about violence and violence prevention in our community, violence awareness. And part of it is informed by or motivated by the high profile of interpersonal violence that's arisen from quote unquote the slap. And the slap heard around the world, and everybody is talking about the incident that we all saw at the Oscars with Will Smith and Chris Rock. And I think that most of us don't want to uh, drag out the drama of that or to be salacious in looking at it and talking about it. People do that, but we don't want to do that. But we think that there is instruction. We think that there is an opportunity for us to look at ourselves, look at each other, how we relate, how we fail each other, but how we can also heal each other. I'm glad to have two people with knowledge about violence and violence prevention joining me right now. Dr. LaDonna, let's see, LaDonna
Combs, like you comb your hair.
Combs. That's right. Yeah. sorry. I have it written down here, and I just missed my notes. And brother Dominique Walltower, right? Dom Walltower.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank
Brother
you.
Walltower, I think, is joining from California. Is that where you are?
Yes, that's where I am. San
And
Diego.
San Diego. Sister LaDonna is joining us from Michigan. She's in Farmington Hills, Michigan. Also on the call, let me introduce you both to my colleague and writing partner here, Brenda Lau Gray. Brenda is joining us uh, uh, from New Mexico,
Santa Fe.
Santa Fe, Mexico, right? And Brenda writes the stories from these interviews that we do every day, 5 days a week. Brenda and I went to kindergarten together.
Yeah.
And we're both about 75 now. So we go back a long, long ways.
What's that song? Take us all the way back.
All the way back. So we've got a view of the world that reflects us having looked at the same thing for a long time, over a long period of time. And it's a wonderful view. It's wonderful that we connected recently to begin this working relationship. Let me do this. We have often when Dr. B initiates the program, she acknowledges the ancestors and acknowledges the owners of the land, the Dakota, Ojibwe people who are residents and stewards of the land that we are on here in Minnesota. And following that practice, I want to acknowledge and thank them for their stewardship. And I want to thank and acknowledge all of our ancestors for providing the continuity, the history, the perseverance that allows us to be in contact, in communion, in relationship building today. And with that, we also talk about using a model of a talking stick. And what I will do is pass the talking stick and ask you to take it. And I'll say to our viewers that this is an unscripted conversation. And my job as a journalist and as a host is to facilitate my guests' intention and desire to speak their truth. I used to, Dr. LaDonna, tell people, pretend this is the last 10 minutes, period. What is it that must be said that you can not say in the last 10 minutes? So with that, the topic is domestic violence or violence. Just with that alone, I'm going to pass the talking stick to Dr. LaDonna. Dr. LaDonna, I want you to first talk about your credentials, your work, who you are, so that people know from whence you speak.
Well, thank you, Mr. McFarlane. I'm so
And
humbled.
please call me Al.
Al.
Mhm.
All right, thank you, Al. Thank you for having me. I'm humbled to be here today. I was excited to find out that I was going to get a chance to share and be a part of this platform. I certainly appreciate it. I've worked with Dr. Williams now for over a decade, traveling the country and doing work around violence prevention and fatherhood and other things, and faith communities and how we respond to domestic violence. And I would say I have a doctor in leadership as well as in a minor in psychology from the University of Charleston, West Virginia. And totally, I had no idea to go on and do all of that, just like I had no intention of, um, doing some of the work I was doing. I was just going to do a little support group to kind of support some women. And it has turned into an actually international phenomena here, a culturally specific one that, sometimes I look back and I go, gee, Lord, how did all this happen? It's been an amazing journey. It's been a real amazing journey looking at the help seeking behaviors of the Black community, of Black women and men, but mostly Black women and specifically, it had always puzzled me around the cookie cutter approaches of mainstream society and how they applied certain resources to Black and brown communities, expecting them to fit what would it fit a mainstream community. And just our issues are different, our trauma is different, everything is different. Historically, it's just different. And it doesn't work. And so, which led me to create some responses to women of color, Black and brown women of the BIPOC communities here in Michigan that would be effective, that would be healing around domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, stalking, and human trafficking. And so those are the things that I've been working in. I'd like to think effectively. Someone was telling me a story about seeing a woman on the beach with, millions of starfish, and she was throwing each one in at a time. And I'm sure you've heard this. And they walked up and the guy walked up, what are you doing? And she was saying, well, I'm trying to rescue, and throw these back. He said, you're never going to finish. You're never going to help, getting all these back. And then she took one and threw it in there. And she said, well, I helped that one. I rescued that one. So just one at a time, we try to do the work we do. Been doing it around the country for about 20 years now, and trying to address faith-based communities around how they can respond effectively to domestic violence, kind of dispel the holy hush that has been in the church for a long time around domestic violence. And it's not that the church, I don't think, wants to move forward in that. They just don't know what to do because it's not supposed to happen there. And so they're kind of, and with the other dynamics around patriarchy and just other things that I'll say the Black church period, but the Black church is entrenched in, many times the pastor is the son of the former pastor. Mm-hmm. And then the next pastor may be the son of this pastor, and they do what they saw their fathers do, and they do what they saw their fathers do. And unless you come across someone progressive enough to understand that what's in the community is in the church. The church is the community. If there's domestic violence in the community, then it's in the church, because that's where we historically go. And so that's the work that I do, being a survivor. I was married to someone in law enforcement. I'm not married anymore. But, that even in itself was something very challenging. But, God has been good. We've been very successful, and we help many women and many churches to come up with solutions around responding to and holding accountable people, that are experiencing domestic violence, who are in a crisis of faith, as well as in communities.
Why don't you pass the talking stick to Brother Dom?
Brother Dom, I'm going to pass the talking stick to you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate all of you for having me on this on this panel today. Again, I'm Don Waltower. I'm a violence prevention advocate. I come from the other side of the street, so to speak, as Dr. LaDonna. I am a violence prevention advocate. I come from the background of being a former offender myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've grown up in a home where domestic violence was a norm in my home. My mother was, I watched my mom as a victim, and then I watched my mom in another relationship as an offender. And so my biological father was violent. There was a whole history of violence in my family. You could say this was a norm in my home. And so when I grew up, I just carried the torch. I started doing the same horrific behaviors until my relationship ended. And that was my aha moment to start figuring out what was going on with me. I started a journey of healing. I needed accountability. And then attached to accountability had to be healing. We don't think of offenders as needing healing, but these are broken people, because you can't treat another person that way without being broken. We talk about Will Smith slapping Chris Rock. That is a broken man that exercised that behavior. And so my focus has been to go upstream, so to speak, and to go and find out what is the cause of this, who is the one that's causing this damage. And so we need to address them. So that is my role. So during my healing journey, I developed a passion to figure out and to help other, particularly men, but women as well, to understand what it is that we are doing to our families, our communities, ourselves. And so that is a passion of mine. I have been in this role for about the last 8 years as a public speaker. I've spoken nationally, internationally. I do a lot of work with the military. Currently, I work with the Marine Corps. I work with the Marine Corps as a prevention and education specialist teaching about domestic violence. I also have a partnership with the San Diego District Attorney. I teach classes for them. I'm in work with Los Angeles County to teach classes with them. I do my presentations and speaking, and then I do one-on-one coaching as well. My primary role is to engage men into this conversation, because this is a discussion that we're not having about domestic violence, sexual assault, healing, though we're not talking about that. So as men, one of the things that happens dynamic in our community is that we learn from each other. We learn from each other. And so I'm using that to my advantage as a man. I'm going to speak the same thing that Dr. LaDonna is saying. She's saying, I'm going to speak the same thing that she's saying. And I'm going to keep saying those things and engaging men into that conversation and helping them understand that we have a role in domestic violence and we can't ignore it. We also have a role in healing and stopping this. And it's a powerful role. And so I want to enlist as many men as possible in this battle to address this issue. So that is my life. Again, I do this all day. I do this during my day job. And when I leave, I teach classes. So I have sons. My sons are involved in this as well. They witnessed some of the violence. They witnessed it, and so they've had to go through a healing journey themselves. And so they're speakers with me sometimes on some of my events. My ex-wife, we have a great relationship, co-parenting relationship. We were able to not reconcile the relationship, but reconcile as human beings towards one another to raise our children in the best way possible. So in a nutshell, that's who I am. I'm sure if there's more questions, feel free to ask.
Well, let me start by asking you to sort of unpack some of that and talk about your personal feelings, what your discoveries were when you became aware that you could be described as, or that you would appropriately describe yourself as, an abusive person. How did you become personally knowledgeable, or convicted, as I say, which knowledgeable at a deeper level, that something was wrong?
It's when my divorce happened. It's when my life crashed. When my life crashed, my wife had left. She had took my sons, and I remember being in my home. Beautiful home we had, big home.
How old were you then?
Oh, I was I was 33, 34, 34 at that time. Before that, I had seasons of awareness. But again, there was no outlet. There was no venue for me to go and say, hey, this is who I am. I didn't want to expose myself. There was a tremendous amount of shame that you carry when you are that person. So that shame is paralyzing. So that shame paralyzed me. And so I just said, well, I just need to deal with it myself because no one else is dealing with this. It's just me. I wanted to change, but then I couldn't go and tell any of you people because then you would know how horrible of a man I was. And I didn't want that. And so once the divorce happened, I recognized, I said to myself, I need to heal. There's something wrong with me. My wife is gone. My kids are gone. And I knew that a significant reason of them being gone was me. And so I said, well, let me figure this out. Let me figure out what the issue is. I did some math at that time. I said, wait, Dominique had domestic violence in his childhood relationship. Dominique had domestic violence in his first adult relationship. Dominique had domestic violence in his marriage. Common denominator is Dominique. So that was the aha moment for me. And then I realized it doesn't matter who I'm with. I'm going to be in the same circumstance unless I heal. So that's when I started the journey of I went to therapy for 3.5 years, went to anger management groups, went to church groups, non-church groups, I went to probably 5 or 6 different places to help me heal myself. But the awareness came in a crash moment. So I don't look at destruction of circumstances like I used to. Sometimes the destruction is you shedding who you needed, who you used to be. I had to shed who I needed to be, and shedding is a hurtful. It hurts when you have to shed. And so I had to shed who I was in order to become who I am today. But that process did hurt.
You operate through an organization, or you have an organization, or you're teaching? Tell me about how you're doing the work today. And then if
Yes.
you would put in the chat your contact information, because I'll share that on screen over the course of the program. But talk about the structure through which you're delivering the knowledge and the healing today.
Well, so my nonprofit is Inspire Perspective. So Inspire Perspective is, and I started that in 2018. And so I've been speaking, doing my speaking events and also teaching the classes within the community through my organization. We just got a grant from the district attorney, so we're thankful for that. But Inspire Perspective is the mechanism that I use to reach my audience, as well as the military community in the Marine Corps. That's my official job. A prevention education specialist. I have a base here in San Diego where there's 40,000 Marines on that base. I am in heaven. I am in heaven. This is exactly where I need to be. This is where I want to be. And I'm spreading to other bases too. I've spoken at Fort Hood, Joint Base Lewis McChord. I've spoken at Maxwell Air Force Base. So I'm going to keep traveling and doing this work through my organization, Inspire Perspective. But I'll go ahead and put that in the chat.
As you were speaking, I sent a note and a link to the show to a friend and colleague who's been a regular. We used to do, and we have to do it again, and maybe you'll help me do it, a regular meeting with veterans.
Oh, yes.
And I'm a Navy veteran.
Okay.
Colonel Rab reached out to me, lives here in Twin Cities, retired Army, and he is a psychologist, I believe, a licensed psychologist, and was commanding a group of psychology professionals in the battlefield in both Afghanistan and at a later deployment in Iran. I'm not sure which one was first, but talks a lot about trauma of war and how that shows up in soldiers' lives and community people's lives as well. So I'd love to hopefully he'll get the message and might just pop on this call. If he doesn't, we'll be doing something later, but you'd be a great person to be in that program with our veterans. So Dr. Combs, let me pass the talking stick back to you. And same kind of question, you mentioned that you were in an abusive situation. What's the personal story? What were the things in your personal life that led you more into the work, not only to heal yourself, but to discover your capacity, your need, your calling to be a healer of people in our community? And I'd like for both of you to talk about the notion and the importance of our people looking to and engaging therapy and mental health resources. The question of stigma. I tell people whenever I can that not only is Dr. B my friend, and not only do I do business with her, Dr. Breveda Akansanya, but her company is also my therapist. I go to one of her therapists every week
Mhm.
regularly, and I have been
Mhm.
for a year, and it's
Mhm.
beneficial for
Mhm.
me to have a time to talk to someone, to look at myself, some guidance in looking at me. And, I take it from 2 points. One is that uh, I want to always ask myself why I'm not where I want to be, because I want to keep being somewhere. And then that lets me look at understanding and appreciating where I am,
Mhm.
and to know that differently. But then I also look at it from the point of I'm a professional, I've got insurance, and when I see TV and the movies, white people go to therapy all the time. And that's
Mhm.
part of their toolkit for building the success they want. They recognize that they can use strategies, tools, information to focus on their objectives. And if they can do it, why can't we? Why can't I? And so I speak this way, encouraging Black men in particular, but Black people to avail ourselves of these marvelous resources in our community, particularly now that we have people like you and Dr. Williams, Dr. B, who know our culture, our story, know the backstory, but also
Mhm.
know the techniques and have the training in the discipline of
Mhm.
counseling, psychology, social work, and
Mhm.
can render these things particularly suitable for our sensibility in ways that respect our humanity and our dignity. It's a beautiful thing. So I say that
Mhm.
to say I want to be part of encouraging all of us to uh, to engage in the healing resources that are available in our community and to use our insurance. And if we can do business with the Black business at the same time, so
Mhm.
much the better. Uh, Dr. LaDonna, I'm passing the talking stick to you.
Okay. Now I gotta think now. Being a survivor, actually, um, I really didn't realize I was in a domestic violence relationship. I was a little confused. I didn't know that was the name of it. Because I grew up in a home where my dad, my father taught me how to write my name. He taught me how to tie my shoes. He taught me how to cook. He taught me how to fly a kite. He taught me how to drive a car. He was doing the things that, and both my parents were together, but I mean, I don't think I ever heard my father raise his voice. I don't think I ever got whooped by my father. My mother tried to kill us, and we needed to be killed too. We was doing some of everything. She gave a whooping. My sister is grown. She probably just got a whooping last week. But my mother, so I didn't really realize what I was in until actually I was assaulted. I mean, I knew something was off because we met in church. I met him in the choir. So I wasn't sure what was going on, or whether I was just imagining things or I was overreacting, and I had nobody to talk to about it until the actual assault happened, which was one good assault. When I say good assault, I lost my vision for about 6 weeks, and so I had to go to a shelter. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think. I had to go to a shelter. And we lived in a very small community, in a rural community in a Republican town, Jackson, really affluent Republican town. So this is back before I don't remember Facebook. And of course, we didn't have Instagram and all these other things, but we did have a chat room. And so, because I worked at the hospital at the time, and because I was well known in the community as a minister, he put me in the chat room in the community as a prostitute, soliciting the community for sex. And I didn't know that until I started getting cards and things at the house. I would get mail, and I didn't pay it any attention because I had left the house for a while and the police had made him leave, and I was afraid to go back. But I went back to get my mail, and being a minister, I just thought a lot of people, it was in the summertime, wow, it's a lot of weddings. Or people, I didn't pay it any attention until I just happened to open one, and I saw somebody who was actually flying in, a student that went to the University of Minnesota. And that's ironic for me now. you know, and I had to get the government involved, and because it crossed state lines, the FBI got involved, and he ended up going to jail for that. We went to trial, and he enlisted his family to help him do that to me, and he ended up going to prison. But I was very afraid, so I stayed at the shelter. And usually shelters are like 30 days. I ended up staying 4 months because they couldn't catch him. He fled the city and he threatened to kill me and all this other stuff. But I had a lot of support. I did have good support, and I was convinced, not to go back, but I also wanted to help women who didn't really understand, because I didn't know other people were going through this until they found out I was going through it. Then I found out that this is something common. And I didn't see it growing up either at the neighbor's house or whatever. I'm sure it was there because domestic violence is a best kept secret in the country. And so I started doing support groups and talking to women. But while I was in the shelter at the time, I'm a grant writer now. So I've gotten almost $2 million in grants to do the work we do here in Michigan. But at the time, you couldn't prey on federally funded property for domestic violence. So we would go in the basement. So I was still going to church when I was in, the shelter. And when I would get back to my room, there would be women knocking on my door asking me, would you pray for me? Would you pray for me? I said, we can't really do this. We're all going to get put out. And I was very afraid of being put out. But I was more afraid of just not fulfilling my calling. So we'd go in the basement behind the furnace, started with 2 women, turned into 8 women. It was a 27 bed shelter, turned into 15 women. We'd sneak downstairs, and I said, God, you have to do something. We got to do something. So that's how the Sisters Against Abuse Society got started. And we had a lot of in-kind things that I was able to do. All I was going to do was support group counseling. But it turned into, me going to school and getting a master's in how to teach people how to empower themselves around finance and just different things to leave domestic violence relationships. And then also understand some people are never going to leave. I've had pastors' wives tell me when I started my program, they said, if I leave, I'll split the church. I just need somewhere to be safe. And so we did safety planning. And, the church is not a place. We don't get therapy because to say you need therapy in the Black church is very stigmatizing. We're supposed to be Christians. We're supposed to be saved. We're supposed to have the Holy Spirit. Why aren't you praying enough? You're not close enough to God. This wouldn't be happening if you had an effective prayer life, or you miss Sunday school, or you're not paying your tithes, or all these things are happening, to you but they're so ill-informed because it's against the law. She's not breaking the law by staying. He's breaking the law by hitting her because anybody else would go to jail. And so I think therapy, which is the reason I created our advocacy supportive group counseling. So we did therapy, not that something was wrong with the victim, but to kind of help her on her journey to healing, to recognize different signs around power and control, just different things like that. And I do advocate for therapy. I have a therapist. I just recently got a therapist, an African-American woman. I'm sure Caucasian and other ethnicities would be effective, but I would have an issue speaking to someone who doesn't understand the historical trauma of my community and why I respond the way I do, and how I'm marginalized or debased or around microaggressions and other things like that. That's the reason. So I think the church now is trying to come along. I think therapy is a good thing. But, the church has historically been the civil rights advocate. There've just been so many things. We go to the church. The church is a social worker. They're they bury people, they feed people. So most Black needs in the community come from the church, even counseling, until we found out couples counseling doesn't work in the church because she's telling the things that are going on in the house, but now she's got to go home with him and face the consequences of exposing the relationship. So that's not, and it raises lethality. I've done funerals too. I'm a licensed minister. I've buried victims. And so they're just, so many aspects around being informed around how to do this work and healing, not just for the victim, but also for the batterer. I work very closely with a woman who has a very good batterers intervention program here called Still Standing. She's very compassionate about healing men, in our community. In mainstream communities, they believe in throwing the men out with the bathwater. You throw the baby out with the bathwater. But you need Black men in our community. We like men. We like our men. We ain't trying to, decimate the community. So that's important too. So those are community partners that we work with as well. And I'll turn the stick back over to Mr. Dom, so he can.
Thank you. Well said. I mean, well said. Very well said. I agree wholeheartedly with what you just talked about. And I am a staunch advocate for therapy. Every platform I'm on, I am speaking as a full-grown adult man, and I'm using all of my manpower to let them know, hey, I went to therapy. It was the best thing that I've ever done. That's what that's literally my verbiage. It was the best thing I've ever done in my life, hands down. I've experienced a lot of things in this life, and what that does is it gives people permission, because we can say, go get help. But if we can't show them, can't show them that you've actually done it, or someone that I know is connected to me has done it, because we all have myths and thought processes about what therapy is. Well, I'm not crazy. I'm not this, or I'm not that. And so when I say it to them, it gives them permission. Go to therapy. I teach anger management class. And so in the anger management class, I tell them, I said, listen, you got 8 weeks of anger management. That's great. But this is not all that a lot of us need. Some of you need to bounce from here to a therapist's office. And so one of my classes that I teach in my anger management is called Getting Assistance. So I break down the stigma of getting assistance. I let them know my story. I let them know this. I go deep with them to the fact of, I tell them, hey, I went to therapy. Not only did I go to therapy, I was diagnosed with depression. I took medication. I was going to do whatever I needed to do to get myself better. Right. And I give them permission to do that. And I said, it helped me. This is what helped me. If it can help you, go ahead and do that. So I think the more of us speaking out on this, especially in the Black community and in the Black church, is going to be definitely beneficial. I had a spiritual journey during my healing too. I was going to church, but I also went to a therapist. So me going to church means I'm positionally saved and, in heaven. But down here on this planet, I need to manage the things that are here on this planet. So that's why I needed to go see a therapist. Just very similar to me. I'm not going to pray about if I got a gunshot. I'll pray on my way to the hospital, but I'm going to the hospital. And so that's why I tell people, keep your spirituality, but make sure you're dealing with the natural things that are happening in this world as well. The emotional damage that we've caused, much like Dr. Donna was talking about, the historical trauma. We're carrying historical trauma, and we're carrying the trauma from this life. If anybody needed therapy, it's us. It is us. It is us. When you watch Will and Jada Pinkett, you watch an extremely broken, toxic couple. I mean, this is not judgment on them, but they remind me of my past relationship. I was toxic, and my partner was toxic as well. We both had issues. We both had our own stuff, and we both needed healing, but we didn't see it. When I started going to therapy and counseling, my ex, we had separated and we were going through a divorce. And then in the divorce court, she was asking for full custody. And of course, you know what I said? I said, heck no. Well, I added some sentence enhancers. I'm not going to say them right now, but you're not taking my kids. And then I remember a conversation I had with my therapist, and he said, what do you want in your life that you've never had, Dominique? And I said, peace. And he says, well, you got to do things that promote peace. And I was like, wow. So at that hearing, when she asked for full custody, I remember the conversation. I told the judge, I said, you know what? Give her full custody. The courtroom was silent. They were like, because that doesn't happen. You fight to death in family law court. That's how it goes. And I said, no, give her full custody. You want the couch, the fish? What else you want? I'm no longer fighting anything. Now, I knew I was still going to see my kids. That wasn't an issue. Ironically enough, they were living with me 9 months later, and we both agreed to that. But that was me being able to manage that circumstance. That was a direct result of me being in a therapist's office on a weekly basis, as you said, sir, like being there, like trying to navigate that circumstance. And so I am I believe that wholeheartedly. And to Dr. Donna's point, it has to be the right therapist. It's not a one size fits all. You have to find your match. I needed an older gentleman to help me during the time of my healing. That's what I needed. I couldn't have a 30-year-old, that was not going to work for me. I needed someone with life experience who could handle the level of trauma that I was bringing, who knew what it was like. And so now, later on, and I've seen life coaches and therapists after that, and those are different people. It wasn't the same. So again, I am a very, very staunch advocate of therapy, and I push it. And every time you let me speak, I'm going to say that. I'm going to say that because I know the power of it, and I know how we are walking around as Black people in this country in a zombie-like state. And just going through the motions. We started going through the motions during slavery and ignoring our emotions, ignoring what happened. We had to suppress and just get this work done. We're still doing that. We're still doing that. Just get this work done. It's like, okay, I've been molested, or someone has stolen from me, or somebody did this or did that or did this, but I just got to keep going to work. It's like, no. You have to you got to stop and deal with that. So in a nutshell, I'm any chance you give me, I'm going to say that. I'm going to say that very loudly too.
Thank you for saying it. Brenda had a question, I think, or a comment. Brenda, jump in here if you would.
Oh, I'm a former educator, retired after almost 40 years. And my question was, how young would parents and teachers start teaching young Black men to value and respect women?
Go ahead. Don.
No, go ahead.
Wow. Did I catch you? But it's important. It's really important that even if they see it in their household, that they have a venue to be able to say, I don't like what I'm seeing. But also understanding what they're seeing. And Al will tell you, we had some of the greatest teachers at Booker T. Washington and D.A. Holmes Elementary. And I guess that's why we have the attitudes that we have at 75. Life hasn't been perfect, but boy, we've accomplished a great deal for ourselves, our families, and other people. But one of the problems that I'm having is that we're not teaching our young Black men what being different means. Because being different can be awfully powerful, and being respectful and valuing themselves and valuing women, that's important, along with academics and everything else. I'm having a problem with the Black on Black crime, the hatred, the self-hatred, all of this anger, all built up. But it's how young do we start? Do we sit a kindergartner down and say, women are different, and they were built different, and they're precious vessels, and we need to respect and value them, along with valuing ourselves? Makes sense?
Well,
I'm sorry.
yeah, it
Coming
does.
from educator and parent.
I used to teach classes in elementary school. You have to bring people into elementary school. And I started as the kids I started with were in kindergarten. And we taught them safety. We taught them body safety on their level from sexual assault. And so
that's powerful.
Yeah, we did. I did that with pictures and with we talked about knowing who your safe adult is and what makes a safe adult. We talked about their bodies and what parts they had the power over. It was very informative, and the children were very responsive to it. They were 4 and 5 years old, to teach them about how to know something is wrong, about a feeling that they have even in their stomach, something they don't have control over, and how to teach them to be safe, and how to teach them to disclose when they didn't feel safe.
I was just getting ready
How,
to ask that. Yeah.
how to teach them, and who to teach them to disclose to when they don't feel safe, and that they have the power for that. And so then we did I did seventh and fifth, sixth, and seventh grade, girls and boys. And I did a curriculum called Peace Begins at Home. And we talked about what domestic violence was. We talked about their moms, their sisters, their aunts, their grandmothers, but we also talked about girls. We told girls how to behave as well, and we talked about what constitutes disrespect, violence, how to respect a person's level of consent. We talked about consent and how children give consent for certain relationships. Especially, we went to high school, and I taught sexual harassment, and we talked about sex, and we talked about you can't really give consent as a young person or even as an adult for sex unless there's equal power in the room, or unless there's
Wow.
equal power within the relationship. So if you can't say yes without severely being afraid of the consequences of saying no, whether it be your rent won't be paid, whether it will be you will be outed for having sex in the first place, whether it will be, then you haven't given consent, let alone unless you're conscious or confident enough to. So we talk about what constitutes consent. And so those things, you have to have people who are experts come into the school, and you have to have certain life skill classes that help children understand on their level how that's done.
And
So,
for Black children,
mhm.
we have to encourage more mental health clinicians and more African American teachers, and especially males.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends that are male teachers. I have a problem with the term black on black crime, because in white neighborhoods, they never say white on white crime. You're going to offend within the culture that you live in, or within the communities you have access to. So black people who break in black people's houses, they understand the community in which they live in and where to go. Same thing as white people. White people, they break into their own houses. It's the difference between when a black boy steals the neighbor's Cadillac, it's grand theft auto. When the white boy steals his neighbor's Cadillac, it's a joyride. Oh boy, take
And
that back.
that's what I'm saying, which
Mhm,
goes back to Al's question about the
mhm,
slap. And I wrote an article about it because I'm pretty angry about it.
mhm.
And maybe that's the old me, but I just um, I'm just stuck with this. We can't do what they do in many cases and get away with it.
Well, really, no, nobody needs to be doing any of that, but
True.
the marginalization falls more, even for color, it falls on poverty. Do you know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Class.
So
Yeah.
there's a compounding there's an intersectionality around certain communities that compounds the outcomes, not just color. It's also around poverty, and around marginalization, and around education, about how the monies just aren't there in our communities that are in other communities to offer the same type of resources for certain outcomes. So it's a big ball of wax with that. But so far as kids, there are resources out there. And then you have to teach the parent too. We work very closely with the Urban League of Detroit, which in most urban leagues in the country, they address marginalization and impoverished communities. So you have to educate the parents as well around different things. So
But
so
with 87% of public school teachers being white, we have an uphill battle.
being white
Um,
in
in public schools, you have, I think Dr. Irma McFarlane was talking about it, and she's our education and cultural editor. And she said it was about 85 to 80% white teachers in public schools.
In Detroit, it's a little different in our
Well,
Detroit public.
probably so.
Yeah. In Detroit public schools, it is pretty different here. We do have great white teachers here too, but a lot of our teachers are African American. The majority of our teachers are African American, and then we do have a lot of charter schools too, faith-based schools in Detroit, because Detroit is a very big faith-based city. You know what I'm saying? We do a lot of things here. We at my church, I help officiate Rosa Parks' funeral, as well as Aretha Franklin's funeral.
Wow.
And as well as most police officers. So we have and we also have a lot of schools based on our churches. So I think that's why you have to have groups. And, you know, and I hate to say this, politics begins at the local level. You have to go to the school board meetings. You have to go. And then when they assign people to speak up for their community, you can't send them by themselves. You got to send them with 30 or 40 people representing your community. And when you stand up to say, hold the people accountable that are on, you know, the curriculums that do these things. I mean, they're talking about critical race theory. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, that's not taught in K through 12. What are you talking about?
It's law school.
Right. It's not. I just had a friend threatened by the Proud Boys in Illinois because he was able to ask them, can you produce the curriculum that you're saying that we're teaching to make white children feel bad in public school? So we're shaming white kids. So did you bring the curriculum with you? They couldn't come up, you know, then they got angry, you know, because they're repeating something. They're just disruptors with no agenda.
They got angry with me when I said I wasn't going to teach the Diary of Anne Frank. I said, because you're saying Germany is still full of Nazis. You know, it's just, it was ridiculous. And it was ridiculous what they did to Justice Brown Jackson. And, you know, but that's okay. She's there.
Right. Oh, yeah. Oh, God. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of tears seeing that.
Oh, my God.
Yes.
Let me jump in with two questions. One, Dr. LaDonna, you used the word questioning or examining the question of patriarchy. I'd like you to go down that path and say how we have to start thinking about it, considering it, as how the society is organized and what the benefits and cost are of that system of organization. Are there alternatives? Have we known something different in antiquity or in history that we can rediscover, that we can remember, that will provide a cooperative model that values every human being and that places the call to action on ensuring that everyone that you know or come in contact with or have influence over is enabled, empowered to pursue self-realization, actualization? That's one question. And then Dom, I'll switch to you, because one of the things that you and I talked about was this question of your being always telling people to do therapy, right? It's great that you're doing that, and I'm on the same page with you. But for me, I think about my grandma used to tell me, you know, mind your business, and what she said after that was our church was our business, right? And so she asked me to look at our religious enterprise as an enterprise. I take that and say, what if we say our health is our business? What if we adopt the mantra, our health is our business, and that we have to mind our business, but also mind, M-I-N-E, our business. And the operative idea is that we all talk about the glaring disparities in health outcomes and access for Black people and brown people in the country. We can look at it like that as a static problem, or we can look at it as an opportunity. And what I'm feeling, Dom, in your comment is that wouldn't it be phenomenal if we had a cadre of 1 million therapists? If we made becoming a therapist a kind of global intention, societal intention, that we have a programmatic or institutional impetus to grow the employment in therapy or the healing arts, the healing sciences, and we turn that into business. I'm ruminating, but let me pass the talking stick to Dr. Donna first, and then to Brother Adam.
I'm sorry. Okay, so when you talk about, I have a terrible case of bronchitis. It's getting much better. I had to go to the doctor for that. When you talk about patriarchy in the Black community, I'll say that. So I'll start here and then I'll maybe go back. The Black community is a community in the church that believes what goes on in this house stays in this house. That's something that we're raised culturally around. That comes from slavery. If you ever saw, the most prolific visual I've ever seen of it was, did anybody see Django?
Yeah, of course.
Remember Stephen? Okay. Stephen was the most prolific entity around field Blacks and house Blacks. And there was a secrecy that had to be kept in your homes in the slave quarters from people like Stephen, no matter what was going on, because it resulted in all types of mayhem and debacle. And so that type of silence around abuse, around sexual assault, around all of that was it was kind of entrenched in that. It was really born out of that. What goes on in this house stays in this house. And there are other things around that too that we're not talking about right now. But when it comes to patriarchy, you also have to go back further than that when you go to Adam and Eve, where Adam was disobedient, but Eve was deceived. But it was flipped. So Adam was told not to do this. Eve was beguiled by the serpent, and God was mad with Adam because he was the one he gave the charge not to do that. So he was supposed to cover her. That's why he said, because you yielded to your wife's voice and did this. So the punishment for women is biblically is interpreted that she can't be trusted. The patriarch, she has to be, I'm responsible for her spirituality. I'm responsible for her voice. She doesn't need to have, hence women wearing burqas and women not having a voice in the Middle East and other things that they blame women for that are behaviors of men. She's to be covered, her face, her eyes, her body, because if you seduce just your hair, a lock of your hair seduces somebody, it's her fault. He's responding. So that's where patriarchy is built on, a lot of that. The problem is people lost the translation for when Jesus came. He came to liberate and he was progressive with women. If you looked at how many women Jesus used, you know what I'm saying? But the church continues, the Black church, and I'm sure other churches too, but the Black church continues to oppress because of the language. Wife should obey her husband. She submit only to her husband. She's to obey. In Ephesians, when we talk about that, but he never tells her to love him. He tells the man in Ephesians 7 times, you're supposed to love her like Christ loved the church, giving yourself for it. And then she will respond. Women are responders. Men are initiators, women respond. And so patriarchy, unfortunately, has, been perpetuated, like I said, from one generation to the next generation to the next generation, around her ability to lead and around her ability to be obedient to her husband. And so, depending on how intellectual or how progressive a bishop or a pastor or a person is around patriarchy, they understand that you're not married to a child, you're married to a human being. So I mean, there's a whole lot of different things that go along with that. I teach a class on that around patriarchy, but unfortunately, women are good missionaries. They're good fundraisers. They do building funds very well. They do missionary work very well. So they're given in certain churches. Now, I happen to belong to a church that's a lot more progressive. We have women pastors in my church. We have women leaders. We have women trustees. We have women deacons. So that's not the norm in the church. The church is coming along, but they're kind of ill-informed around violence and domestic violence. Will Smith talked about his mother being a victim of domestic violence and his father being the batterer. He's talked about that in the past. And so his reaction, what was going on, was something, you don't know what happened the night before. You don't know, pretty much, because they're pretty transparent about what's been happening. But anytime, like I said, you don't get help and you don't, your health and well-being, emotional health and well-being, sometimes you just break, and you break when you break. If you're not seeing it, you break when you break, and I was talking to another friend of mine, and he was saying, what I would have did if that had been me. What he said, I would have went up on the stage, took the mic and said, my wife has a condition called alopecia. Mm-hmm. It's an autoimmune deficiency. She's still very beautiful. I love her very much. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry you thought to make a joke out of my wife. Would you apologize? And after that, how much can we expect from you? A donation to the Alopecia Foundation. Okay. That would be really, what I'm saying? That's a way to handle those type of things if you wanted to be in display. But he was in crisis, and that was traumatic for him. And the fact whether she provoked him or not, he knows the environment that he has to function in, and he cracked. I mean, outside of I don't throw Will Smith away. I'm not going to throw Chris Rock away. They're very prolific. I'm not going to stop seeing his movies. I'm not going to stop supporting Chris Rock. Things happen. I mean, if they're not going to take Harvey Weinstein's Oscar from him, who's been sexually assaulting women, winning Oscars for 30 years in the Me Too movement, then they don't need to take Will's. If they're not going to take the other guy, there's so many bad behavior.
Roman, what's his name?
Polanski or whatever.
Yeah.
If they're not going to,
yeah.
Right.
We're coming up on out of time. Let me
I'm sorry.
for a minute. This has been
Go ahead, Dom.
Wonderful conversation. Brother Dom, I'm going to close the program with you.
I'm so sorry.
Time to
you should have cut me off a long time ago.
No. Oh, absolutely
it was
not.
Great.
This is perfect. And I threw out the question about the business of our health that I wanted you to respond to, but you don't have to. You can just respond with whatever you want to. But that's okay. What I had in my mind.
Well, I do want to just really quick say to Brenda's question, teaching young men, it's not teaching them about loving women. That's not what it's about. It's teaching them about respecting themselves.
Yeah, I said that.
Yeah, they have to learn to respect themselves. They have to, when you carry yourself with respect, love is automatically going to come to you. So when you teach them, there's a lot of young men who are taught how to love a woman, but not love back. Will Smith was taught how to love a woman, but he was not taught how to love a woman. Jada Pinkett is a broken woman. Jada Pinkett has some abusive behaviors. We have to be able to say that. If we can't say that, then we can't heal as a community. We have to be able to call out men who are abusive and women who are abusive as well. Will Smith had a choice. He looked and he said, it's going to be better for me to walk up on this stage and embarrass myself than to walk home with this woman if I don't do this. That is that's an emotionally abusive relationship. Jada Pinkett has made it clear that she does not love him. She loves Tupac. Those letters are out there. She has stated that on set, and that is emasculating. Here's another thing that we're not talking about now. And don't get me wrong, I'm not excusing Will's behavior. I'm giving the background as far as what's happening, the abusive relationship that they have. It's abusive on both ends. Will is extremely codependent. He is trying to prove. And there's a lot of women, and I have to, sorry to say, that was not a man protecting his woman. That was a broken man trying to find his manhood. Now, we haven't seen that. We haven't been able to see a man protect his woman, so we'll grab onto anything that looks like it. That was not a man protecting his woman. That was a man trying to find his manhood because he's lost it. He's been emasculated. It's not a coincidence that after the Red Table Talk, where she disclosed that incident that she had with her son's friend, and talked in great detail about how that made her feel good, and he's not. That's emasculating. We don't. These are another conversations that we're not having. Right. She emasculated him in that moment, and so at that moment, it's been a downhill spiral. The constant talk about Tupac, the constant degrading of his sexual performance in public, on Oprah, on these shows. It's not a shock. Will's reaction. Will's been in Hollywood for almost 40 years. He's never behaved this way, though. It's not a shock. Though. It's not a shock that after that Red Table Talk, it went downhill because all of the things are made public. It's humiliating. It's emasculating, and he was trying to find that. So I'll stop and I'll say this, that there is work to be done on both sides of that extreme. And I said this to women too. You can't hijack toxic masculinity when it's useful for you. That's not okay. Oh, wow. We can't say, because, that was toxic masculinity. And before that conversation, everyone said, hey, well, that needs to stop. Now we're saying, well, hey, well, it's good now because I can use it. And that scenario did not didn't need a response. Now, the men that I teach, I tell them, you don't say a word. You sit there, you say to your wife, hey, I'll handle this later because we have a bigger deal to deal with, and I will deal with this behind the scenes. That's how mature. We don't need to do anything because you're at a ceremony where you're receiving an award for an Oscar that you worked hard for. It was an all-black cast. It was an all-black cast that we were talking about that produced it. All-black producer. Samuel Jackson was winning an award. There were so many things about that award. And you know what we're talking about?
That's
alopecia. We're talking about alopecia, which is, no, that's not what it should have been about. That and I say this, that and the men that I talk to, we don't want a partner, man or woman, is going to allow you to do that and watch you do that. There should have been like, whoa, no, babe, we're not going to do that here. We'll deal with that later because there's a bigger scenario. That to me is the love that we should be looking for, and they need a lot of healing. And I have to say, I've been brokenhearted about the responses to this because we're not calling it what it is. We're saying, oh, yeah, he protected her. Or it just breaks my heart to see that they are not the couple goals. They are broken. Right. They are broken. They are extremely broken in the response, both of them. And so hopefully one day we can start addressing those issues.
Well, I just want to thank both of you. Very powerful. I'm going to have to sit and think about this for a while before I put it into words. Very powerful. And I needed to hear some of it as a 75-year-old woman. So thank you very much.
It was a pleasure hearing Dom. He brought some perspective.
Most definitely.
Yes,
thank you.
Perspective.
All of you, and I appreciate all of you. Thank you all for having me here, and I really appreciate you guys for this platform. And I look forward to working with you in some way, shape, or form.
We'll do it again.
Absolutely.
I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Okay.
Have a great weekend.
You too.